So hey you guys, welcome. Morpheus here. This video is going to be a little bit different as I will show you how complex editing is. In a few seconds I will show you an intro that I made for Ascindaz. This video is not really a guide on how to make it, but it's more a show of how complex it is, how many hours and patience it takes to make such a thing. Sorry for the audio quality, by the way. I'm using my headset instead of my high definition, high quality microphone. I forgot to bring my cable for that one. Anyways, I'm going to show you the intro now. And let's talk about it afterwards, how I made it. So that was the intro. I hope you liked it. Yeah, so it was a lot of work. You need, first of all, 3 programs. You need WoW Model Viewer, which is this thing. You need After Effects, which is here, and you also need Premiere Pro to add the sound effects later. But let's just look at WoW Model Viewer first. So here you can import your armor character by going to Character Import, and then you can import your audio, your character from the armory. You can select the stance. So let's say you like this thing. I don't know. And then I'm going over this really quickly, by the way. It's just to show off how complex it is. Then you say export model, OBJ. You create a file, it creates an OBJ file, but also creates some JPEG texture files. You go back to, oh yeah, by the way, I also need a background. So you can go to environment, stars, and you can select the background. I like this background, and I recorded this with a different program, Bandicam, Fraps, or whatever. So then we go into After Effects. Now the fun begins. So we have this thing as background. It moves over time. I increase the speed, otherwise it was too slow. Then we go to the first layer and element. Now you see all the models. You think it's quite easy, but now you can see this is element 3D. It's like a program into a program. It's like programception. Here we have all the different models, the banner, the engine, all exported from WoW Model Viewer, some debris, some metal plates that he stands upon, and the file itself. You can import and then select here a file and import it. But it's not that easy because here you also have materials. You have to select a texture map for this. As you can see, there are different texture maps, and here you can select the right texture map for that particular item. So that's element 3D. Then here in the settings of element 3D, you have to move around objects, otherwise they will all be standing in exactly the same spot. They overlap each other. So here you have to change with everything. You also have rotation, which in this case only rotates the character. You have different groups, group 1 till 5, which all accounts for each one element, 3D element. Then you also have world transform, which basically edits the whole size and rotation of all the elements together. Then you also have render settings, you have lighting settings, which I also covered. I rotated the lighting a bit. Now you can see it's completely different. You can also click what kind of lighting you want. And that's just beginning. Then you also have ambient occlusion, which makes it a little bit darker in this case, but it does way more than that. That's Element, and that's really fast explaining on how Element works. So yeah, that's Element. So let's continue. So it's way more complex than I just explained, but this is just the basic, right? Now I wasn't satisfied with the color, so I added Mojo, which creates a little bit different look. As you can see, there are all parameters here that I have to play around with, which already takes a lot of time. Then brightness contrast, which increases the brightness and the contrast. So this is before and this is after. It's just very subtle. Then the first adjustment layer. So what this does, it creates a camera blur, lens blur around this mask. I also had to create a mask. This mask also has a feather, which you can see here on the bottom, of 400 pixels. So you can understand this is just one effect and it already takes a lot of time to make. Then you have a camera. Now this camera changes everything. As you can see, you can click the camera thing here, you can rotate, you can zoom in and everything. I just press Ctrl Z right now. This is how you zoom in to the character. You can also do that, and you can animate this over time. So this is the first thing that you have to edit over time. Actually, no, the 3D element 3D you also have to adjust over time. But here you can see the camera options. So these are keyframes. So if I go to the next keyframe, which is here, you can see it's completely different. And this changes gradually over time. So this has to render now, so it's a bit slow, but you can see it changes over time. So that's the camera. That was not enough, of course. I also needed light, an optical flare, which is another plugin that you need. Now, these are all options that you have here, which already seem quite complex, but that's not all, because this is another program into a program. Here you see the lens flare. You have here different elements of the lens flare. Here you can add more elements to that lens flare, and you have here more settings of that lens flare. So you can imagine the complexity of this alone. Then I also have to edit this over time as the light needs to flicker, so I had to put a expression here, wiggle 20.8. This wiggles it over time, so it kind of flickers the whole time, which makes it seem more realistic. Okay, then we go to atmosphere. Atmosphere is just a layer on top of video, which is just a video of some smoke. Smoke just going its own way. But this was way too much. So what I did is I increased the brightness and contrast, or changed the brightness and contrast so it's less obvious. I changed the color with curves, which is also quite complex. You have different curves here that you can play around with. And mojo again, which makes it more natural. As you can see, this is way too much red. This is more natural. Now it's really a dust look. That's again one freaking layer. Then we go to an adjustment layer. This is looks. As you can see, it looks totally different after I apply it. So before, after. Now this is another program into a program. I pressed edit, it takes some time to load. And in this thing you have subject, matte, lens, camera, post, all different kind of effects. Here you can see all the different effects that you can use, which is already quite extremely complex. Here you have presets that I'd never use, but they're quite good. Now this is a vignette, makes it more dark on the edge. This is a color correction. This makes it more natural, less saturated. And then we have these things that I turned off and on, but I turned them off in the end. This is diffusion that I will do later because I needed to do that after some other layers first. Then we have this thing, which is basically the text, which I have to show you a bit later. This is also animated over time, so if I go back a bit, you can see it zooms in. Wait, I have to expand this and then see where the keyframe is. So it's here. So here you can see it zooms into the character and then that's it. But this is also not that easy because you have to create a text layer and then you have to adjust all these settings. You have to go to element, scene setup, and you here have the text. You can change everything. You can make it have more depth. You can change the materials here. Yeah, so you can also imagine, and then you have more settings here, which is just insane how much settings you already have. Now, this is not enough, of course, because I needed a color correction, so I did mojo first to make it give it a bit more contrast, then colorista, which is also quite difficult. You have shadow, midtone, highlights. You can change all the colors from the individual groups, and then it looks like this. It fits his character more in the whole color scene of the whole scene, whatever. And some brightness color correction to make it a bit more lighter, otherwise it was too dark. Then we come to fire. So this is one fire. It's just another layer that I had to adjust in size. As you can see, it's not full frame, it's only on the bottom. This one as well. Now you can see there's a color difference because I changed the hue, which I had to do for later effects. So that's even more options. Then we go to glow. These are layers that create some kind of glow in the corners, which also has some color correction over it. So this is before in the right corner. This is before. This is after. So make it a bit more natural. Then I added more lighting effects. So this light, which is basically a red light, that's it, which also flickers over time, so this is also animated. Then we have this light in the other corner. You can see it's already a little bit more the same color right now. So, but that's not all, because I also have fire embers, which are these particles that fly from the fire into the sky, just, burning embers in the sky. But I had to change the brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and mojo again, which all these settings are just a lot. And I also had to create a mask because otherwise it will be on the entire frame. Now it's only in the right corner above the fire. And also this mask also has a feather, so you don't really see where the particles end or begin. Now for this on the other end of the screen, the right screen, same thing, a mask, particles, 3 different color corrections onto them. That's it. And then we have some particles all over the place, which also has the 3 color corrections over it. Because I didn't want too many particles on top of Ascindaz himself, only on the edges or where the fire is, but still I wanted some particles. So these things you can download from YouTube, by the way, if you Google 4K resolution free particle footage or something. Then we have even more particles, which you can see here. Let's go back so you can see them clearly. Yeah, so you can see these rings in the screen, so I will turn it off and on. This creates a bit more realism, like some particles of the fire are very close to the camera and they're really blurred. I didn't like the color though, so I applied Mojo and brightness and color correction, so it reduced. Otherwise this was way too much. This is just good. Now you only see some rings. And this also moves over time, of course. Yeah, so it's quite complex. Then we have another adjustment layer, Lux, which basically is only diffusion in this case. I pressed edit, has to load again. Yeah, so it's only a diffusion, so this is before, after. You can see it's a little bit different. It's just more nice. It's very subtle, but more nice. Also Mojo again over it. I thought this was way too much reddish, so I wanted to create more contrast between the fire and the background, so now it's more bluish, and I thought it was more natural, more epic looking than this. So this is before, this is after. This is very personal, of course. I like this one, but maybe you like this one more. Anyways, I like the dark bluish color in contrast with the red. That was not all. I also have this adjustment layer, which is a terminal displaced. Now I have to explain what it is. If I zoom in to the fire, now, well, fire creates heat waves, but you don't see them yet here. As you can see, the model of the engine in the back is just completely sharp and shit. Now I press this effect and see what it does. See? So this is before, after. So these are heat waves basically. But the heat waves shouldn't be on top of the whole footage, only on the areas where there is fire. So I had to create 2 different masks, which you see here with the yellow things. And these create these heat waves. Also, I have mask feathers, so you don't see where the heat waves suddenly end. It's gradually going over into no heat waves. And then another element, which is basically the second text, because the text had to move from behind the camera to behind the fire, and also the heat wave should affect the text. So I'm rendering it now, as you can see here. I think this is quite cool actually. I'm rendering it again. So here you can see the A and the Z is highly affected by the turbulent displays of the fire. So this makes it seem really realistic, you know. It gives it really a feel like there is real fire there and it's really hot, you know. I really like this effect. And that's almost finished, but this whole comp with all these effects, all these parameters, these programs into programs with more effects and more parameters went into this comp, which is basically the final editing comp, which had some twitch effects that I will turn on right now. So for example, this is how the intro starts. It has like a shake and this bloom, bright light. Then it has this effect. Then I also have here that it, like there is thunder, it suddenly becomes more bright and then darker again. And I also have these effects onto it that I'm loading right now. See that it like goes and that's it. Also, these are all animated over time. It's not all the time. You have to set keyframes, which you can see here. It's even more complex in the case of the last thing. This is transform. This is the camera zooming in. At the beginning, it's very zoomed in, and at the end, it goes to 100%. It's very subtle, but even this is more complex because I added it in a graph. It goes from 180 to 114% to 100%, but this is over time, and I made it so that it goes gradually instead of like you can see where the camera zooms in less fast. So I made it go gradually from one zooming in phase to the other, so it goes fluently. Yeah, that's the best I can explain in a short time. Then we have another adjustment layer, which is basically Lux again, but now with a mask, so it only affects the edges of the frame. You can see it affects the fire a lot. It makes it look in my opinion, more awesome. It also creates like more bluish in the clouds and stuff. I think this color correction is quite cool, which is again Luke's. Um, I'm loading Luke's again, which always takes time. So here you can see it's just this color correction and this thing that makes all the colors a bit more natural, and shoulder, which reduces the saturation contrast and makes it a little bit more natural, which you can see here. For example, this is no shoulder. As you can see, it looks a bit weird. With shoulder, it looks more natural. I know this is all very like subtle, but it helps. You know, it really helps. And that's the whole thing. So as you can imagine, it's really complex. This really takes hours and fine tuning and playing with the parameters and everything. It takes an incredible amount of time and patience. So again, for 2 people only, because I'm limited to my time, I actually want to make an intro like this for 2 people for $150. Only for 2 people because my time is limited. And I can make something similar to this. This is just one scene, by the way. I made 3 different scenes. One scene also had, in the camera settings here, it had like depth of field, which you can do here. Wait. Camera options, here depth of field. It's off right now because I don't need it in this scene. And then you can change the aperture, focus distance, and the blur level. Only this is already so many parameters that you have to edit over time. You know, because when I do something like this, I don't make it so that the aperture and everything is always the same. Now it focuses on a close by object first, and then the focus goes to a far away object. You can see that in the intro of Ascindaz that I'm going to show you at the end of this video again. And please just play it over, and then you see how the camera like focuses on a different object. Also, you can see in the first scene, no, the second scene, that the light of the world is turning, which I did in Element 3D. So you can see the light is not static, but the light also changes. Also, the position of other things changes. Also, I had to change or animate the position of the fire. Because when I turn the camera, the fire actually remains at the same position, which I can show you here. If I click camera and I turn, which takes a lot of time now, the fire stays the same. As you can see, the fire is still on in both corners. So I also had to animate the fire to change position in some scenes, because otherwise they would stay at the same position and that looks horrible. So you can imagine the amount of time it takes to set all these parameters, to play around with them, but also to change the position of everything so it's more realistic. Also, the turbulent displays of the fire needs to be animated, the mask of it at least. So it's really complex. Anyways, I hope you guys like this video to explain a bit more about editing and how complex it is, how much time it takes. And if anyone is interested in having an intro like this, leave a comment in the comment section below that you want an intro like this. You have to pay $150 because I have limited time. It's a lot of work. But I'm happy to make it for like 1 or 2 people, or maybe 2 or 3 people. Anyways, I hope you guys like this video. I guess more views out. See you guys next time.